What's up, college football addicts? Notre Dame has a very real possibility and very real chance of being left out in the cold. Not necessarily out of a conference. I know they're the great white whale there in conference realignment, but I think they have a decent chance of being left out of the college football playoff when they deserve to get in at some point in the next few years. Let's talk about that. As most of you are aware, in the 2024 college football playoffs and beyond, we're expanding to 12 teams. And I think we can all agree this is going to make college football much more fair and will also most certainly avoid the nightmare that we saw with FSU where an undefeated team gets left out, as well as the situation with Georgia where probably the best team in the country gets left out. But I do want to warn you, there are other nightmare scenarios lurking in the shadows of this 12-team playoff. The first scenario, and being the most obvious, is the battle to be 11th or 12th and not 13th or 14th. Also, every team who advances in the college football playoff earns an estimated $4 to $5 million per game for each game that they advance. This means that you could see $10 to $20 million being earned for teams who go deep into the playoffs. So as you can tell, 12th place and a few lucky wins could be worth over $10 million. While 13th place gets none of that money. That's a huge, huge difference. The second nightmare scenario being the battle to be ranked 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, which gets you a home college football playoff game as opposed to being ranked 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th. I want you guys to think about how much money is involved for the local economy to have that home playoff game. The difference between being 8th and 9th in ranking is probably worth $20 to $30 million for your local economy. And that doesn't even factor in how much ticket sales matter, how much merchandise and concessions and everything else at your home stadium will be impacted. Needless to say, being a borderline team on the outside of those possible nightmare scenarios is truly a nightmare. It could cost your program tons of revenue. Now, I know that you're thinking, this could happen to any team. Why should Notre Dame fans be worried? And I especially know that you Notre Dame fans are thinking, we're not worried about this. I mean, you guys probably have the single largest fan base and tons of political connections, and you're probably thinking, you've never been treated unfairly in the polls because of all those years of having those advantages at play. But you're going to want to stick around and hear what I have to say because I think you guys might be in a little bit of trouble. Right before we get to that, do me a favor, whether you're a Notre Dame fan, college football fan, ACC, SEC, Big, doesn't matter, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of good content coming on this subject and others. So make sure that you're part of college football addiction. As most of you know, though, Notre Dame is an incredibly valuable brand and is the single most valuable team left who is still independent. I think it goes without saying that both the SEC and Big 10 would love to get Notre Dame to join their conference, but some recent developments have introduced some major problems for Notre Dame's path to the college football playoffs, both in getting in and respect to getting a home game if you do get in. Recently, you may have seen the news about ESPN and Fox joining forces. And remember, ESPN owns the rights to the SEC and Fox owns the rights to the Big 10. So not only has ESPN and Fox joined forces, so have the Power 2, the SEC and Big 10 when it comes to conferences. They just announced that they're forming a new streaming app together, and they also announced that they'd be working together to modernize governance for the Power 2 because the NCAA is failing so badly. They both just walked out of the college football playoff negotiations and threw down the gauntlet, saying that they would likely not participate in the college football playoffs after 2025 if the other conferences don't come to an agreement with them. They have so much power right now, it's insane. Now, think back to last year and what happened to FSU. It's very easy to say, oh boy, FSU's QB got injured, and that's why it happened. But the truth is, ESPN began lobbying for kicking FSU out over Alabama before FSU's QB even got hurt. They wanted Alabama in. They wanted Texas in. And remember, this year, Washington is joining the Big 10 and Texas joining the SEC. So ultimately, you'll notice that the final four teams were made up of either current or future SEC and Big 10 teams. But what should terrify you if you're a Notre Dame fan is that if you go back and look at the college football playoffs final rankings before the playoffs, there was only one team in the entire top 13 that was outside of the Big 10 and the SEC, and that was FSU. My point in all of this is to say that ESPN and the SEC and Fox and the Big 10 are clearly working together at levels that we've never seen before. This started prior to last year, and it can be clearly seen with the results of the college football playoff rankings. It can be clearly seen with them leaving out an undefeated FSU, and it can be clearly seen in the weeks and weeks that they leveraged both ESPN and Fox and the media to argue in support of what they did to the Seminoles. Notre Dame prides itself on independence. It's always valued independence over making profits. But make no mistake when I tell you this, if there is an SEC team or a Big 10 team sitting at 13th and Notre Dame is sitting at 12th, hoping to be the last team in, the SEC and the Big 10 will be working together. If there's an SEC team sitting at 9th and Notre Dame sitting at 8th, hoping to get a home playoff game, the SEC and the Big 10 will be working together. And they're going to be working with their representatives at the college football playoff. And they're going to be working with their media propaganda arms. Just ask FSU how effective this was. Your political connections and years of getting the benefit of the doubt because your Notre Dame isn't going to matter when you have the Big Two conferences united in making sure that their teams get as much money as possible. And if they'll do it to a program as big as FSU, don't make the mistake of thinking that they won't do it to Notre Dame. The reality is FSU learned a very hard lesson last year, and because of it, they're very likely going to end up in the Big Ten a year earlier in order to avoid this crap ever happening again. Now, at the end of the day, if Notre Dame goes 12-0, they're always going to be in. If Notre Dame goes 11-1, I cannot imagine a scenario that they're not in. But if Notre Dame's 10-2 and they're sitting at that 10-12 range, and there's an SEC team that's 9-3, don't for a second think that they won't jump that 9-3 SEC team and use conference challenges, conference superiority over an independent. Don't for a second think that they won't jump the team. The records no longer matter. They will always take one of the Big Two teams over a Notre Dame, over a Florida State, over a Clemson, a Miami, a North Carolina, any team that's not part of the Big Two. Just realize that it's coming. This is not just bitter FSU talking. This is the reality of where our sport is. Notre Dame's not getting left out at undefeated, and they're probably not getting left out at 10-2 or 11-1. But just know that if it's close with an SEC team, they will no longer get the benefit of the doubt. And that should worry Notre Dame fans. I don't know if it worries Notre Dame's administration or organization or if they just need to get burned by it one time for them to finally get into a conference. But I promise you, you want to know when Notre Dame will stop valuing independence? It's when they basically get told, hey, you got left out because you were an independent. Just like Florida State got left out because they were in the ACC. And what did they do just a couple of weeks later? They filed to get out. They filed lawsuits to leave. Notre Dame won't have to do the same thing. They'll just get up and go to a conference if that's what they want to do. But I do think it's the route that it will end up going. Just get burned once, and then I think you make your decision. Hopefully Notre Dame's administration leadership is aware of this, realizes this before it gets to this point. But I don't know. I can't guarantee that they do or don't. And I know Notre Dame fans, I love you. I've got no problems with you. I know you're cocky. I know you're going to say that'll never happen to us. That could never happen to us. Just trust me. As big as your brand is, when it comes down to it, Fox and ESPN are going to get what they want. These media conglomerates that are paying billions and billions of dollars and making billions and billions of dollars, they don't care about your brand. They care about their wallets, and that's what it'll ultimately come down to. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think I'm crazy? I'm okay hearing that, but I do want to chat with you on it. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to College Football Addiction.